Hi, everyone. Welcome back to For the Girls. We're super excited for this one. We've been thinking about it for a while. We're going to get into how to pick a Grand Prix to attend, how to get tickets, what it's like to be at the race, our top tips for the specific races we've been to, and hopefully it's helpful if you're thinking about going to a Grand Prix. To listen to the full episode, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/forthegirls. I'm Sarah.
I'm Jessa.
And I'm Tiggy. Okay, so to start, how to pick a Grand Prix. I think something we've talked about before, but something that's super cool about F1 is just how different and unique each Grand Prix is. They truly feel representative of the place and the culture you're in. According to Gunther in his book, he says they used to be a bit more standardized and similar regardless of location, but these days they really seem to embrace the location and the culture wherever they are, and I think that's such a treat. So
Definitely.
every Grand Prix we've been to has felt really different and kind of like a learning experience for us since we don't have a home New York City Grand Prix. In Austria, for example, we felt like we got to learn so much about the history of the country and experience the culture on, I would say, a pretty deep level through the lens of F1, but even outside of that too. So I think there's so much to learn from going to a Grand Prix and seeing a country that way.
Shout out to Max and the city of Graz.
Exactly. I feel like you can't go wrong when you're picking one. Like, at least in terms of the experience, I think you're going to have a good experience. But then there's just like certain things to think about. So I think for the first one, for sure, it's location. Obviously, or it might seem obvious, but they are weekend long experiences. You spend a lot of time exploring the host location outside of the track. So it's kind of fun to kill two birds with one stone by going to a Grand Prix in a location you've been wanting to go to anyways, tack on a couple days, like make a whole trip out of it. So there's definitely a lot of things to consider when you're picking a location. I think the first one would be rural versus city. So pros and cons to both, obviously depending on which city we're talking about, but generally rural tracks are harder to get to. But like we said in our Austria recap, it is really dedicated fans. Like the energy is super intense. It's very racing centric versus a city, take Miami, where you have people, celebs. It's very accessible. People are just showing up kind of like for the hype or the experience. But with the pro of a city is that there is a lot to do outside of being at the track. So just a few things to think about.
Another thing to consider is whether you want to go to a street circuit versus a classic track. It's very different vibes. It's hard to generalize since not all street circuits are the same, but generally they can have rougher road surfaces and lack the same facilities and space of other tracks. But on the other hand, they can be a bit easier to plan for and have more of a historical feeling like Monaco and Baku. And another big thing to think about here is that it's often much harder to do general admission at a street circuit. Another factor is whether you want to go on a sprint versus a normal weekend. We've been lucky enough to get to experience both, and sprint weekends are really fun in person because you basically get 3 full days of excitement. You have quali on Friday, then the sprint shootout and the sprint on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. So it even feels like a bit of a kind of extended weekend.
Yeah, and then a few other things. So, price, sort of stating the obvious, but not all Grand Prix are made equal when it comes to cost. I think it's important to factor in ticket prices, which can really vary by Grand Prix, but also other considerations, flights, trains, gas if you're driving. Those can be very different depending on where you're going. How expensive are hotels and Airbnbs in that location? What's the cost of living in that city or the country that you're going to? Because everything can add up. So things can balance out. So maybe if the flights are more expensive to a certain place, but it's a lot cheaper once you're there for hotels or Airbnbs or restaurants, then maybe it evens out. So just something to keep in mind.
And also something to think about the price too is the cities, especially cities that don't usually have a lot going on except for the Grand Prix weekend, hotel prices will really skyrocket when there's a GP there. So that's good to think about if you want to book ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And then just two other quick things around picking. So this may sound minor and a bit silly, but lap length is something to keep in mind. That was one
Yeah.
thing that was so nice about Austria was how short the lap was. So we got to see the cars like over 70 times versus going to a track with a super long lap, you'll see the cars less. So that's something to keep in mind if you really are like trying to squeeze out the bang for your buck in terms of like how many times am I going to see these cars go
Dollar
around?
per car appearance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Getting very specific here.
Yes. And then last one, which I think this is a really fun one to think about, is just are there home drivers or home teams at these locations? I think some races are heavily dominated by fans of specific teams and drivers. Mexico, super heavily Checo, of course. Austria was basically a Verstappen home race. Austin had tons of McLaren and Checo fans, but it wasn't hugely dominant either way. Of course, you'll have races like Monza and Silverstone where you know what you're getting, but it can be really fun to experience races that heavily favor a driver or a team, even if it's not your driver or team. Like, I'm more of a Mercedes fan, but it was really cool to experience Austria and the Orange Army. It just, I think, gives you more of an appreciation for all fans. So shout out to that.
I love that. In terms of getting tickets, this is definitely a bit of an operation. So try to get tickets as soon as you can. And if you're aware of it in advance, so now would be a good time to start looking for the 2024 season. Even if tickets aren't on sale yet, you can sign up for email notifications for when tickets go live from both the main F1 website and then also from the local circuit or promoter. And a lot of the times, the race organizers or promoters or the circuit itself handle their own ticket sales on the circuit website. And then the F1 website will also have sales. But for a lot of races, there can be different or more availability directly through the track itself as compared to the F1 website. This is especially true for Miami and Vegas, which is interesting. There's much more available on the circuit websites. And the main F1 website was kind of more geared towards the premium hospitality that F1 itself runs. And then Miami and Vegas, one thing to keep in mind, they do this weird thing where even for normal grandstands, the buttons on the site will say inquire for more info instead of just leading you to a seat map. Do not ask me why. I have no idea. But do this and you'll get connected via email with a very nice person who works for the circuit and can send you options. So, of course, they might kind of try to push you towards certain things. So be direct about what you're looking for. Like if they email saying, here's what we have, you can say, oh, I'm really interested in the Turn 10 grandstand. What do you have there? Also, Vegas has a lot of hotels and casinos with ticket packages, which is quite unique to Vegas. So definitely there's a lot of options and routes to look at outside of just the F1 website.
Sarah is our ticket extraordinaire and has a lot of really nice relationships with ticket people across the circuits in the United States. So if you don't manage to get tickets through all of the awesome options that Sarah just said, or maybe you're like a little bit late, there is a secondhand market. It's a great option, but definitely be careful about which sites you're going to. There tend to be fees, so it's best to get them direct from the source if possible. But of course, you can look on places like StubHub, Vivid Seats. I know some people have got theirs through like via GoGo. We got our Austria tickets through StubHub. Really liked the experience. But one thing to be mindful, though, is when the tickets will actually become available for download. So our tickets were available for PDF download on StubHub a week before the race, even though we bought tickets several months. So just like make sure you're keeping track of when you got the ticket, when it's available. Do not wait until you're like on the way to the track to download them. We had a friend do that, and unfortunately it did not work out well for him. And definitely be careful if you're venturing outside of the main big site. So if there's a ticket reseller that you trust and have used for concert tickets, that's a good route. For example, our one friend, he used like a small specific reseller for the Mexico tickets. It was a disaster. His tickets weren't there. Customer service didn't help him on the way to the track when he was trying to get the tickets. So definitely just I think everyone listening here is probably like knows what they're doing, but just be careful.
Shout out to Dylan. Watch the Mexico Grand Prix from the Airbnb.
So sad. Not to put him on the spot, but he also lost his phone on the trip.
Dylan, I hope you're not listening to this.
Anyway. Another thing to keep in mind is wristbands versus transferable tickets. So the next question to ask is whether you want to go all 3 days, and if so, if you want to buy the tickets all together or separately. So for some circuits like Miami, if you buy a 3-day pass, you can split off and sell the Friday tickets if you don't want to go or can't go that day. But for Austria, the 3-day tickets can't be split up like that. So It is often easier and less expensive to get the 3-day pass, but just poke around at options for buying each day individually. Sometimes it's better, but tickets are much less expensive on Friday and even sometimes Saturday. So that could be a fun opportunity, for example, to sit on Friday or Saturday in a grandstand that's more expensive on Sunday, and then sit somewhere else or do general admission on Sunday. So there are ways to kind of splice and dice, or just go for one day, for example, if that's what works.
Honestly, when it's your first Grand Prix, the most exciting thing is just listening to the cars race. And so you're going to hear that Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
So true. And in terms of the big decision of general admission versus grandstands, and then if you do grandstands, where you want to sit, the key here is to do a ton of research. We did general admission at Austin in 2021, and we had an amazing time, an amazing experience, but we also picked a bit more of a random portion of the track to sit at. We were between turns 18 and 19, whereas the big overtaking zones like turn one were super crowded.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, general admission will be better at classic tracks that are outside the city, like Austin or Austria, because there's a lot of grass and open space to move around, but it can be much tougher at street circuits to find a good place to watch in general admission. And oftentimes there's much less availability for general admission tickets in the first place. So for grandstands, you really need to dive in to figure out the best turns to sit at. The start finish grandstands are really exciting to see the start and the pit stops, but in general, I think it's usually more fun to sit at a turn where there's a lot of overtaking, where there's a big braking zone instead of on a straight. So first start with a circuit or grandstand map, look at pricing to see what's possible. Then literally just Google things like best turn to sit at Austria GP. And
Really high tech.
yes, extremely advanced, and click through the sites and articles. Two examples we really like, F1 Destinations and the F1 Spectator, are great sites. They have a lot of information on the view from particular turns.
Then I would look at the quali and the race recap from last year and see what corners get mentioned a lot. Something like there was a big overtake at turn 10, or lots of track limits issues at turn 11, or whatever it is, to see where there is the most action. So if you want to dive in even more, like, this is extra credit. Rewatch last year's race, see what parts of the track look exciting to you. We're just, we're giving it all. Something also that's interesting to think about, track elevation and vantage points make a big difference. So a lot of that you can find out through the online articles or just from looking at photos, pull up a topography map, like. But Austria was amazing.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Because with the elevation changes, you can see multiple parts of the track from your seat. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, if you're sitting at like a high aspect, that could be really cool. So for our specific grandstand recommendations, in Mexico, I think we have to say Foro Sol. It is just
100%.
The energy, the view, the access. It's so cool. And for those of you who need a pop culture reference, Foro Sol is where Taylor Swift is playing in Mexico City.
I knew you were going to say that.
In a couple weeks. Sarah, what do you think for Miami?
For Miami, definitely the beach grandstands, especially there's one right at turn 11, and you could kind of see down the straight going into turn 11, and then turn 11 had a ton of action and overtaking, and then you could also see turn 12. So I definitely recommend turn 11.
And for Austria, we sat at turn 10. It was epic. We got to see the back of the grid do the start. We got to see the exit to the pit lane. We got to see two turns, and then we got to see turn one in the distance up on the hill. So absolutely insane. Okay, let's get into the logistics because this is my favorite part. Transportation and hotels. Okay, so accommodations, obviously they're going to vary if you're at a street circuit, if you're in a city, if you're somewhere rural. For example, in Europe, camping is a very popular way to go. If you are a strong person and can do that, more power to you.
Not me.
I don't even think we ever even considered it, but low-key, even the camping, they have like different tiers of campsites. So the campsites actually were pretty cool. But like I said earlier, definitely reserve rooms ahead of time in a hotel or go to an Airbnb in advance. One thing that we like to do, maybe it's a little bit off the beaten path or rogue, but we like to book things that have cancellation policies, and we like to book in advance there and then see what we can get elsewhere later, because a lot of things do open up closer to the weekend. They do get very booked up, like I just said. In Austria, like Graz is a very small host city that booked up very, very fast. Sarah actually emailed a bunch of hotels to get on their wait list. So it seems like a lot of people were doing what we were doing.
I think Sarah emailed every single hotel in the city of Graz.
And you got a lot of people responded, right? Like it
Yeah.
worked out
Yeah,
really
the
well.
front desks of the Graz hotels are extremely nice.
There we go.
Definitely recommend.
Another plug for why we love Graz so much. In Austin, we did an amazing Airbnb. Austin it's kind of a spread out city, so if you're willing to Uber to wherever you need to go, it worked out really well. So another thing about logistics is the neighborhood that you're staying in and how easy it will be to get to the track. So in Austin, it's very hard to get to the track, which we'll talk about, but we were staying in East Austin, and the pickup for the shuttle was in the center of town, so we'd have to like get up, Uber to that, wait in line, get on the bus, and then go. But what was it like it's in Miami, Sarah?
Yeah, in Miami, it seems like the traffic from South Beach would be really difficult getting to the tracks. It's kind of similar. South Beach is east, obviously on the water, and then the track is at the Dolphin Stadium, the Hard Rock Stadium, which is more west. So the drivers and teams actually have full police escorts and like their own lanes and stuff to get from South Beach. But the usual Grand Prix attendee will not have a police escort. So I think that could be a little tough staying on South Beach. Our friend of the pod, Allison, is from Miami, so we stayed at her parents' house, which is more in the suburbs in the west and is closer to the track. And then we would go to South Beach at night to go out when there's way less traffic. So definitely neighborhood, I think, is a big thing to consider. And for flights, one thing that can be helpful is to try to arrive a day earlier or stay a day later on the back end to try to make flights more affordable, or get a little creative about cities you're flying into. Like for Austin, a great option is to fly into Dallas and rent a car and drive. And that can be a lot more cost effective than flying into Austin.
Yeah, or Houston. We've done some Tetris there.
That's the best way of putting it.
Yes.
Tetris.
So, getting to the track, I think it's a great idea to look at a map before you get there, especially if you're driving. It will help you figure out the best place to park relative to the entrance, help you figure out where your seats are, where the different, fun things you want to see, all that good stuff. For some track specific tips. So, Austin, this is a great race, but like we were saying, getting to and from the track from downtown Austin is pretty difficult. I'm hoping that they've amended the situation a bit.
Apparently, it gets better every year.
Yeah. When we went in 2021, it was tough, but you can get shuttle passes for a shuttle that runs from downtown to the track, but it's a kind of a multi-hour process with long lines. So try to get to the shuttle way earlier than you think you need to. For this year, we'll probably look into maybe Ubering or driving, although traffic is difficult regardless.
Yeah, it's kind of like Tiggy's favorite saying, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Mexico was like the opposite experience. Tressa, you can regale us
I
on.
will rave about the Mexico experience. The best thing is if you're in a city and the Grand Prix doesn't start until like 3 p.m., I want to get brunch. I want to hang out. Like, I don't feel like I want to be having to just like logistically maneuver my way into getting to the track. So, Mexico, the subway is the best way to get there. It's like you can obviously pick it up in many places throughout the city, takes you directly to the track. And then once you get off the subway station there, it's like a 10-minute walk to the track entrance. It's a really fun walk. There's like all these vendors. You can buy all sorts of fun things. I will say it's very crowded, so keep track of your belongings. Another thing about the subway, though, if necessary, is they have cars and like specific subway cars and entrances for women and children. So it felt really safe. It was really nice. But they do also have a lot of Uber access to get to the track. But driving in Mexico City is rough. The traffic is really intense.
For Miami, if you get grandstands, you'll get another email closer to the date about buying parking passes. Definitely do this. Do not ignore that email. There are a lot of parking lots, but which I did miss the initial email and then I think got a farther lot as a result of it. So there are a lot of lots, but some are about a mile walk to the track. So I think doing it sooner, right when you get the email, will probably help you get a closer lot. But overall, there were pretty good logistics with respect to driving and parking.
Austria was a bit of a mixed bag. So the parking the parking was relatively easy. It is free, which is glorious, and it's in the field surrounding the track, but figuring out which parking area is closest to an entrance or your seats is helpful. On Saturday we didn't really do that. On Sunday we did. We could just walk in, but Saturday, yeah, parking was a bit farther. But we did get to take this adorable little tram up. So parking there is one thing to keep in mind, but getting out and exiting is a whole different ballgame in and of itself. So the Sunday parking was closer to the track, but getting out of there post race was an experience I will never forget.
Shout out to our chauffeur, Grant. I was supposed to drive that day, but I told him he had to drive, and he absolutely crushed it.
It was
intense.
Yeah.
He won a World Drivers Championship getting out of that parking lot.
We were joking.
Insane.
It was like, yeah, it was rally. It was like a rally car race.
I'm trying to think of, again, with the pop culture references, imagine like you're at MetLife or you're at a big NFL stadium at a Taylor Swift concert and you parked immediately next to the stadium and are trying to get out.
And there are no lanes,
no-
no rules. Everyone's just
directing.
every person for themselves. Well, but no, then people start to get out and direct, but like
just to get themselves out.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
I forgot about that. Everyone getting out of their cars to direct traffic.
Oh God.
We were there for like 4 hours, but that's okay.
Yeah, it was fun. So a little bits of tips and tricks for when you're at the race. Definitely just take it all in. It's a lot of walking if you explore everything, but it is fun to see as much as possible. The other grandstands, the different turns. Definitely, we like to get there early on one of our first days to get our bearings, because then it just feels like a lot easier going in and out the next few days. Look at a map ahead of time, understand where everything is, your seats compared to like the start finish, straight, the pits, any of the iconic turns. It's fun. Like in Austin, it's like a fair. You can get like turkey legs and all sorts of fun things. Other tracks might have fewer hospitality areas, so it's good to just scope it out. You can buy merch. Like I said, in Mexico, you can get a lot of off-brand merch, so to speak, on your way in. But it was really fun.
For some kind of practical tips and tricks, definitely bring phone chargers or charging blocks. Wear really comfortable shoes or sneakers. Be prepared for a lot of rain and or sun. Definitely just generally be prepared for some elements. Austin and Miami are so hot. Like I cannot emphasize
And
how hot
Mexico
they
was
are.
too. Mexico was insane.
Yeah, bring a ton of sunscreen, bring hats and sunglasses, wear something light and comfortable. Almost think of if you were outdoors all day in like 90-degree heat.
Hydrate.
Yeah, that too. F1 Destinations has some awesome resources, and FanAmp does know before you go sessions for each race, which are really great. Most circuits allow you to bring some of your own food and at least one plastic water bottle, but check the rules on what size bag you're allowed to bring. I know for Miami, there were kind of almost what you'd expect for a concert, like bag rules on what size you can bring. And then the For the Girls Discord and also the Grid Click group chat are great for getting in touch with other women who might be at the race or might have tips about attending.
Yeah, shout out to both of those. So we wanted to just do a quick ending section comparing, contrasting the ones we've been to. So first, for sort of vibes and overall experience for Austin, I personally love this race so much. It also happened to be the first one we ever went to before we started the podcast even, but we talked a bit about this during our Austria recap. But to me, it's sort of the perfect balance of being really racing focused while showcasing so much of what is great about American culture. And plus, Austin is really just an incredible city. There's great food. The people are super nice, great nightlife, not outrageously expensive. I think if I had to like sum it up in a sentence, it's really one of the most versatile sort of all around crowd pleaser races for any type of fan.
I agree. I think the cons of getting there and it being a little bit frustrating, it's definitely outweighed by all the fun stuff.
Yeah, totally agree with everything Tiki said. I love this race. I think it's definitely the best option in the US for general admission since the area around the track is huge. There's lots of options for viewing areas, and there's just a really great racing, fun city, and totally agree with what Tiki said that I think it really just has something for everyone.
For Mexico City, I think I might be a little bit partial since I'm from Mexico City, but I think, and I'm a logistics queen, so Mexico City logistically was the easiest race. It was a walk in the park, relatively speaking. It was so fun. The energy where we sat at Foro del Sol was insane. The fans are really, really fun. And you are so close to and basically just in the middle of the city the entire time. So you do get the double whammy of all of the incredible culture, all of the incredible food in Mexico City. I think it was one of those things where the race and the city kind of like melded together, and it wasn't like the stark contrast of like getting to and from the race and the city. It felt like a really nice integrated experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, anyone who has not been to Mexico City, add it to your list immediately. It is just the coolest city ever. The food, like Tressa said, is outstanding. It's relatively, inexpensive in terms of Airbnbs, hotels, restaurants, that sort of thing. So even if it, is a little bit farther, there's just so much to take advantage of when you're there. So highly recommend that one.
For Miami, I love Miami. I had the best time. It definitely does fall kind of on the spectrum of the more over the top races, as I'm sure everyone knows, but the racing was good and I was really impressed with the circuit. I think they did a great job. Things felt very organized and well planned, and there's a ton to do with the circuit for everyone, which is fun. Think kind of pop ups, concerts. Like, for example, Ferrari had this big display of road cars. And then one thing they did starting this year, which was really cool, is anyone can get into the upper decks of the Hard Rock Stadium to look down into the paddock. And so I overall love the experience. I think all of this, though, is with the caveat that if you don't love Miami or are not into kind of an over the top American entertainment vibe, then this might not be the race for you.
But if you want to see drivers wearing football helmets and full outfits, then this is definitely the race for you.
Yeah, if you want a wild call out as drivers walk in.
On the opposite end of that spectrum, we have
For
Austria.
sure.
So listen to our Austrian Grand Prix recap for more details. But I thought this was a perfect first European race for us to attend. There, like we said, so much culture and history, super friendly people and fans, which I will say we were nervous about from the 2022 stories, but we just had the best experience. It's countryside, it's beautiful, just the setting, incredible. Again, very racing focused. So it really felt like we got to experience so much of like what F1 is and has been historically in Europe kind of through that setting.
Yeah, for me, it felt like an F1 expedition. It was like very much 95% focused on F1, and then like 5% we picked restaurants and stuff to sustain ourselves throughout the weekend. But it was very much like an F1 expedition, road trip, fun vibes.
Totally agree. I think it felt like such an authentic, classic way to watch F1, and we really loved it. And I think Tiki mentioned this earlier, it definitely felt like everyone there was a serious racing fan. It felt very much about the racing. It felt like you could walk up to the average person there and ask whatever the championship order or ask some detailed F1 fact, and they would know. That was kind of the energy. So that was just an amazing experience, and I think it was great to see the passion from the fans. How about for our top recommendation for each? So kind of a tip, a restaurant, a bar, a neighborhood. Let's start with Austin. What do you guys think?
We stayed in East Austin, right, guys? It was so fun. I think that was a really good area to stay in. The restaurants were amazing there. I think my favorite was Birdie's, so definitely would do that.
Yeah, my top recommendation, we said this already, but general admission is a really good way to go if you want something that's a bit more affordable. It wasn't bad at all. Find like a good spot that's not too crowded, and you have to go to Torchy's.
Tell us more what Torchy's is.
Tacos.
There you go. I'm just for the people that don't know what it is.
For the people, it's tacos. It's
The
so
best.
good.
For me, we did a really big group dinner at Matt's El Rancho, which was very fun. It was great for a huge group dinner, great vibes.
So for Mexico City, I think my recommendation, again, it's so cool because you get to just like flow from the race into the city and the nightlife. Roma Norte and Condesa, definitely explore them. There's bars, cafes, really cool street art. There's good Airbnbs there too. It's a beautiful, like historic part of the city.
Yes, my CDMX recommendation, sit in Foro Sol, like I said, and literally eat 6 meals a day. The food is so good. You can have little snacks throughout the day, but I like literally eat 6 meals a day. You won't regret it.
For Miami, again, this kind of goes with what I was saying before of if you're not kind of into the Miami vibe, then this might not be the race for you. But there are lots of DJs and events on South Beach that you can get tickets to ahead of time. So we went to Martin Garrix at one of the South Beach hotels because it just really, really felt fitting with the F1 theme. As you all probably know, a bunch of the drivers like Daniel Ricciardo, Max Lando were all posting with Martin Garrix over break. So I guess he's the chosen DJ of F1.
He is. He's inducted more people into his cult slowly but surely. For Austria, okay, I would say save time to explore Graz. And my favorite part of Graz, obviously walking around the town and the square, and we had beautiful weather, which was great. But going to dinner outside in the little sort of outdoor square, we went to Genießerei am Markt, which was great vibes. Chessa, I think you picked that one. It was so good. It had really good food. It had these like liter wine spritzers or like Aperol spritz options
Yeah.
that were like pretty affordable and fun for a group. So we had a blast.
Yeah, Graz was amazing. Definitely recommend staying there if possible. There are some smaller villages closer to the track. There's Spielberg where some people stay, but Graz is only about a 45-minute to an hour drive away from the track. And it's just amazing. A lot more options for food and accommodations. And there's so many really cute boutique kind of local hotels, which is great. And also, this Grand Prix is just a great way to add on a few days before or after in Vienna, which is what we did.
For me, I'll just wrap this up. If you're driving, try to figure out what the street signs mean before you get there. Would have been really helpful.
Jessa was an
Okay.
incredible, incredible driver on this trip, but yeah, we had some slight navigational
The
difficulties.
sign she's referring to is one way. Look up what one way is in,
One way
in German.
and a tram only street. Anyways, I hope you guys all enjoyed this and it's helpful to give you some color when you want to attend a GP. As we start to attend more on our Patreon, we'll start to collect like little one pagers so you guys can reference those as well. But thanks so much for listening.